Welcome, everyone, to the Turning Pain into Strength podcast, where I have real people with true stories with unforgettable journeys. I am your host, Michelle Eberwein, and today we meet Eva Nevarez St. John. From her service in the Army to the deep friendship she formed with fellow servicewoman named Janice, she shares her story of grief and addiction when Janice turns up murdered. I start with her joining the Army in 1976. Take a listen. If we can go back, you joined the Army in the 70s, correct?
Yes, I joined the Army in January of 1976.
Why?
Why? Well, the main reason was I was in an abusive relationship and I needed to get out of that, which I did get out a few months before I got into the Army. But,
Okay.
the reason I got in the abusive relationship was because I was on my own. I was going to college and I had become homeless. I was originally supposed to be in the dorms, but then my girlfriend convinced me to give up my dorm and go move in with her and her parents. But
Okay.
that didn't last very long. And then I ended up homeless. So uh, after a roommate that didn't work out, I ended up moving in with my eventual husband. And then that became abusive. So I was like, okay, this isn't working. I grew
Yeah.
up as an Army brat, so I was familiar with the military and I knew that was a job and, a paycheck, and they would pay for my school so I could
Right.
continue my education. So that was pretty much the reason I signed up.
I mean, that was my first question when I read that. I was like, why in the 70s and 80s? One, because I didn't think that women were really accepted into
They
those
weren't.
roles. And it just seemed a little scary for a woman to join the forces back then.
Yeah, at the time I didn't know that. I was naive. I don't know, but I just always growing up, I always thought women could do anything. I didn't know better.
Yeah, there you go.
I thought
Yeah.
I could, yeah, I thought I could go to West Point or be anything I wanted to be. I could be president. I had no
Right.
clue that at that time, really, women were supposed to be housewives and secretaries or teachers or, nurses maybe, but they're very
Right.
limited roles. I didn't realize that. But yeah, I did
Yeah.
find that out.
Yeah, I bet. Did you get a lot of teasing in the army?
Um, Not too much, but again, the idea of the roles. I was in administration, which was a typical female role, like a clerk, secretary
Okay.
type of thing. But there was sexual harassment and sexual discrimination, and that came up a lot when we were in Korea because Korea, which is where we met, she was my roommate. Janice was my roommate in
Mhm.
Korea, and I mean, it takes reading the book to really understand what was going on in Korea because it's a whole different culture. Women are totally subservient in Asian culture. I don't know, probably a lot still today, maybe, I don't
Of
know, but
course
definitely
they
then.
are.
And men were there without wives or, spouses and children because it was still considered a hostile duty station.
Okay.
So they basically it was almost like a playground for them. They
Yeah.
kind of forgot they were married while they were in Korea and they had a good old time. And
Yeah.
yeah, so they didn't really appreciate American women there
Mhm.
messing up their game, because
Yeah.
Janice and I would complain about different types of discrimination that we
Mhm.
faced. Like we had NCO clubs and you go there, you could eat dinner or lunch or turned into nightclubs at night, discos. And we would complain because the people that worked at the club would actually bring in the hostesses, which were, of course, prostitutes, into the base and onto the club. And the women that were servers didn't want to serve the American women until they'd served all the men. And even then, they were hostile towards us. And we would complain, we would file discrimination complaints, and nobody would do anything. So
Wow. Wow. I mean, that's a lot for to go through. Did you ever just want to quit?
no, I'm pretty. I
You're
consider
tough.
things like that a challenge. Yeah.
Mhm.
No, not gonna quit. I'm gonna fight.
How long were you there for?
In Korea.
No, in the forces.
Oh, so I served 3.5 years on active duty and 3 years in the reserves.
Okay. Now, you and your best friend got out at the same time?
Yeah, I left Korea about 6 months before she did, and we would continue to write. We wrote each other our diaries. Like I wrote my diary, mailed it to her, vice versa. And then when she got out, we were hoping to be stationed in the same place, but she went to Fort Knox, Kentucky, where she was before she went to Korea, and I went back to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, where I was before I went to Korea.
Okay.
And then we did get out at the same time in July of 1979.
Hmm.
And that's when we moved to Washington, D.C. together.
Oh, okay. And then what did you do there when you guys got to Washington?
Well, I had finished my college degree when I was in Korea, and so I was going to law school. So I was admitted to law school at George Washington University in Washington.
Wow. That,
Yeah.
wow. So far, you have lived such a colorful life.
Yeah.
And we're not even through the rest yet. All right. So then you and your friend moved in. What happened from that point on?
Well, like I said, we continued our military careers in the reserves.
Hmm.
So I was a counterintelligence agent and she became a drill sergeant. We also got jobs. She worked full time most of the time, and I worked part time while I went to school. She eventually started going to college as well. So
Hmm.
we had school, work, and the military keep us
Yeah,
busy,
you guys were busy.
but we still had time to party.
Oh
So
my gosh.
we did that too.
So then what happened? Because
So
then
that
did
was
she become, I don't know, did she have a bad relationship? What happened?
she kind of had a few bad relationships. She originally grew up in Miami. That's
Hmm.
where she grew up, and she really liked that environment. And she just didn't feel that comfortable in the DC area.
Hmm.
And so after 2 years, she decided to move. At one point, we had she had met somebody while she was in training that lived in Norfolk, Virginia Beach, Chesapeake area in Southern
Okay.
Virginia.
Hmm.
And we had gone down there to visit, and I guess it kind of like planted a seed in her mind. This would be a good place to move to. So in July of 1981, she moved down there and started school there and work, working
Yeah.
part-time
Hmm.
as well. And she actually was in the ROTC program to become an officer.
Oh, okay. Wow, you guys were busy. Now, did you move to Miami then?
No, no,
Or
but she
Virginia?
liked,
She went to Virginia then.
yeah, because she liked the beach, the whole
Yes.
beach vibe reminded her of Miami. Yeah.
Okay, so what were you doing at this time?
I was in my last year of law school, so I had to stay, of course.
Okay. And then did you move to Miami or did you start practicing law in Washington?
No, well, like I said, what happened to her happened in between before I graduated from law school. So,
Oh, okay.
yeah, so and she moved there in July of 81, and I went down a couple times to visit her. And then in like November, well, she had written me a couple letters, and that, I mean, like I said, we were very close. We told each other everything. And that happened up until September when she started school. And then all of a sudden, it was kind of like she was holding back. She wasn't sharing as much of what was going on with me. So then it was like in late October when she started telling me that she was dating someone and she was kind of afraid. And if anything happened to her, check this person out. And then I couldn't get a hold of her. And I called her job. She hadn't been to her work since early November. I called the school and they hadn't seen her. And so that's when I knew something happened, based on the letter she had written me. And so I went down there. That was like in the middle of November.
Hmm.
And I went to her apartment and her car was there, but she wasn't there. Again, that would be unusual. Why would her car be there and she's not there?
Sure.
And so I went straight to the police with the letter to tell them, she was missing and I thought something happened to her and the person that I thought would be responsible.
Wow. Now, did they respond or did they just kind of blow it off or did they start searching for her at that time?
Yeah, they sent somebody over. Well, first they were interviewing me, and then they told me, well, this person that I said, could have done something to her, they called and reported her missing that morning. What a coincidence, right? Which I
Wow.
had talked to them earlier, and they claimed they didn't even notice that she wasn't there. So again, then this is where the sexism comes into play. The male detectives didn't believe me, and they called the female detective to meet. Well, they brought her in because I showed them part of the letter. The letter included conversations about buying an ounce of weed, right? So I didn't want
Yeah,
to
we'll
show them
keep
that part. Yeah,
that.
I was like, okay, here, cops here. We're trying to purchase illegal substances or whatever. So I
Right.
just showed them the part about, if something happens to her. So they're like, no, we have to see the whole letter and blah, blah, blah. So that's when they brought in the female detective, and she finally convinced me to show them the whole letter. We're not going to use anything against you, or just, find
Yeah.
out what happened to her. So then we went to her apartment with the female detective and a couple of the male detectives. And they started, well, I had a friend in the complex, and so they told me, well, first we have to do this and that, and then we'll be ready to see you, which I didn't quite understand that because they made me leave my car at the police station and brought me there, and then tell me I can't go in with them. At first they wanted me there, and then they didn't. So I went to my friend's house, and they, started searching or whatever, and then they finally told me to come back.
Hmm.
So when I came back, the male detectives are reading her diaries. They're looking at her photo
Oh
albums,
no.
and we used to take nude pictures of, of men and things like that.
Being
And
girls.
yeah, as a playgirl, we lived the playgirl lifestyle. So
Aw. Back
yeah,
then it was
so
normal.
but they took it totally the wrong way. Oh, well, obviously she ran off with some guy, and she was at the time when we were in DC, we dated a lot of black guys. So there were a lot of these pictures were black men. So of course they're in the South, they're racist and sexist. So she probably ran off with some black guy. I'm like, no, she never dated any black guys there. She only dated white guys when she was there. And I said, no, that's not it, because they didn't want to look at the person I was pointing the finger at.
Right.
And so the female detective, she believed me. She told me she could see I was getting upset when I kept saying, no, that's not what happened.
Right. They weren't
And
listening.
right. So she took me out to coffee and she says, I believe you. She says, I'm the lead detective here, which of course they didn't act like she was the lead
Right.
detective.
Hmm.
And so from that point on, eventually I had to go back to DC, and she continued the investigation and she continued pursuing this person. And I hate to give away what happened, but something happened to the person that was the suspect. And but there was still no sign of her, so she's still missing. But at this point, I figured she was dead. So she continued to pursue the case, and her superiors wouldn't look, even though one of the witnesses took her and a lieutenant that was over her on a ride. They said, okay, this person had asked me to go with them to look for a place for camping. And they went, it was like 60 miles away, and told her to write down the directions for how to get there and everything. So, in other words, it was a remote area that, why would they do that unless they were looking for a place to bury somebody far away?
Yeah.
So, she's like, okay, we have to search this area. And they
Right.
refused. They were like, and then they told her they took a helicopter without her and flew over there, and they didn't see anything suspicious. And, they didn't want to find her. I don't know why they didn't want to find her.
I know. Why didn't they want to find her?
I just kind of feel like they felt like she was, if she dated black guys, she must have been a tramp, and we don't care what happens to tramps. You know what I mean? That's the only conclusion I can really come to.
Wow.
But eventually in January of 1982, uh, she actually contacted a person, a lawyer who was connected. I don't know. Somehow he convinced them to let her search there.
Okay.
And when she searched, I mean, she just walked around the building, around the area, and she saw what looked like a clandestine grave, and she called them out there, and they came and they dug and they found her. So she could have been found months earlier,
Yeah.
when they first found out about it. So that was basically it in a way.
There was
I was,
closure at that point, but now who did it?
well, we all knew who did it. I mean, the males probably continued to deny it to the end, but me and the detective, we knew who did it. The person that, well, like I say, I hate to give it away, but he had committed
Right.
suicide. So that's like an admission of guilt in itself, right there.
Yes.
So,
Holy cow.
yeah, so that was the second part, the murder part.
Yeah. No, you don't have to go into the second part, but I mean,
I mean, that was it.
obviously,
Yeah.
I mean, at least there was some closure there. We weren't, I mean, finding her, it was the closure, but yeah. When did you start your healing journey?
So yeah, so I finished school and I went on. I ended up moving to Chicago and lived there for like 28 years. And I just kind of was something that I kind of stuffed down. But I mean, how do you stuff down something like that, right? And my main way of coping with it was addiction. I was using a lot of substances to numb myself and not deal with feelings and things like that. So and I just kind of put it in the back burner, like that's over. There's nothing I can do about it and that kind of thing. So I moved to southern New Mexico in 2009.
Mm-hmm.
And 10 years later, in 2019, I got a letter addressed. I had changed my name and everything. I got a letter addressed to my name when I was in the military, which was Booker. And it was from this detective who had also got married and changed her name.
Oh my.
But she had tracked me down, and we had stayed in touch probably through about 1987 when we kind of lost touch when I was in Chicago. And so she had kind of talked about doing a book about it. She really wanted to do a book about it, but I didn't pay any much attention to that.
Mhm.
But at this point, she was like really set on it. And so, I talked to her. She said she had given the materials, all her records and everything to somebody to write a book about it. I don't know how long before, but they had sat on it for a long time and never did anything. So, and by now she was in her 70s. Yeah, 70s then, I guess. Yeah, something like that. And so she's kind of feeling like, I got to do it now, it's getting late. um,
Running out of time.
right, running out of time. So I said, okay, well, I'll see what I can do to work on it with you. And I'm thinking, well, maybe we're going to work on it together now,
Mhm.
and in my mind, it was always going to be a story about the three of us, me and Janice and her. But
Right.
in her mind, the story was about her and her case. Janice was a case to
Okay.
her, you know.
Yeah.
So that would continue to be a conflict as we went along. But
Mhm.
so I started writing some things, and she sent me things that she had already worked on when she worked with this other writer.
Mhm.
And so that went on, I don't know, maybe about 6 months. And then, life was happening. She had breast cancer and other issues moving, and all kinds of things came up. And so we kind of put it on the back burner. And then there was COVID and everything. And I did some other writing. I like genealogy, so I wrote some genealogy articles and I sent her a copy. And that was in, when was that? I think that was in 2019. No, no, wait, that started in 2020, January 2021, I think. Yeah, that's when it was. So that's when we kind of picked it up again. I sent her that article, and then she told me she found somebody else that wanted to write the book, kind of as a ghostwriter. And she showed me the contract. And again, it was the same thing, focusing on her and Janice as a case. And I just felt like the story of Janice should include her life and not just her as a body, you know. So I told her my concerns about that. And then was it 2020, July of 2021? Yeah. So in July of 2021, her and her husband had bought an RV, and they lived in the same area, of course, where the murder occurred. And they were going to drive to California. And to get from there to California, you got to go on I-10. And to go on I-10, you got to go through Las Cruces, which is where I live. So I'm like, oh, great. So, we can finally meet after 40 years,
Yeah.
basically. Yeah. So she came by and we met, and then she told me she found another person to write the book. And this was somebody that the lawyer had recommended. And she told me his name. But again, the whole conversation, I'm like, well, maybe we can write it together. I just kept wanting to see the book. When she said, well, maybe we just need two books. Maybe you just need to write your own book. And that kind of threw me like, but I thought we were doing this together. But no, that was only in my mind. You know what I mean? Yeah. I had something in my mind. She had something in her mind, and they weren't the same thing,
Yeah.
So that's when I finally realized, well, she's probably right. I'm going to have to write my own book if I want a book that's, the way I want it. So,
Right.
So then I thought, okay, now that she's already told me about two people that she had planned to write the book with, and she gave them everything. So if I'm going to write a book, I have to go and get a copy of everything before she gives it to this next person. So that's what I did. So I went to her house in July in Virginia, and I just, copying and with copies and photos and everything, all the records and files that I could, until I ran out of ink. But so that's when I really started the writing process for that.
And then that was the beginning of your healing journey, writing the book.
Well, actually, the healing journey started in 2019 when she contacted me, because at that point I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to write this book because I'm still getting high. Now, I had tried to go through recovery several times in my life. The first time was in 1986. I got a couple years clean. 1994, I got a couple years clean. 2004, I got, I got up to like 3 years a couple times. But something would always, set me back. So I was like, well, number one, I'm going to have to get clean, and I probably have to go to therapy to really look at this, because this has been buried for 40 years.
Right.
So being with the VA, I contacted the VA about going to a therapist. So that's where I really started the healing journey. So I started meeting with the therapist and talking about why, about writing the book and exploring all these feelings that I hadn't felt in 40 years,
Trust over the years, because
Exactly.
That's quite a bit.
Yeah, that's a lot, because, was a lot of guilt. Like, was there something I could have done, of course there wasn't, but, you think that.
Sure. Yeah.
So then I started going to meetings again, and then I went to a conference. And so I actually pretty much got clean around May of 2019. And so I've been clean. I had a little slip up because I had these what's called canna caps. And then one day in September, I had trouble sleeping. I said, well, let me take a canna cap. Not thinking it has THC, is going to make you high. That's a relapse.
Yeah.
And I told my counselor about it, my sponsor about it. And I said, I didn't mean to do it. It was an accident. And she's like, it doesn't matter. You relapse. You have to start all over. So that's why I say my clean date is September 30th, 2009.
Yeah.
But I haven't had any drugs or alcohol or anything since then. So yeah, so then that's been part of the healing journey and recovery. Also in November of 2021, after I had gone to see Kay copied all the materials, I contacted her family because the other thing was when after she passed away, I was still in touch with her family again for till maybe about 1987. And I asked them if they were going to have a funeral or anything for her, and they said no. So they just had the ashes.
Yeah.
So at this point, I found them. They were in North Carolina, which, and she was, Janice's mother was like in her 90s at that point, or early 90s. And her brother, which I'd never met, she had two brothers, but I had never met them before I contacted them. And one of the brothers' partners had called me, and that's how I got back in touch with the family. And so I told him I wanted to come out there and meet with them and see about having a memorial for Janice. So that's what we did. So we went out there in November, and I invited Kay to come, and she came also. So we had a memorial for her. So that was real closure, sort of.
Yeah.
The second closure. So that was really good. So I'm still in touch with them, although her mom passed away about a month ago, just very shortly ago, when her mom finally passed away. So, like I said, I had done a little writing with Kay in the beginning of 2019,
Mhm.
but after I got all those materials, then it was time to really start writing. And in the beginning, when I started writing with Kay, I pulled out my diaries, my letters, my pictures, but again, it was just too overwhelming, at that time to
Yeah.
deal with it. So by this time in 2021, I was like, okay, now I got to really get serious about the writing. So there was a woman I'd worked with who had helped me edit an article that won a writing contest for a genealogy journal.
Okay.
So I asked, so she was doing a memoir writing group or something. She was going to start. So I did that with her for a year. Then I got a developmental editor in 2022. And, and that's when I really started putting together chapters and things like that. And started the book in 2022, 2023, 24. It takes a while. You do the chapters, and I did beta readers, and,
Mhm.
I continuing to learn how to write a memoir as I went along, reading a lot of memoirs as well. And so finally in July 2024 when I finished, and it came out in August 2024.
Mhm.
That was my healing journey for the most part. But now, one day, her brother's partner said, well, maybe we could bury her at a veterans cemetery. And I'm like, oh my God, why didn't I think of that? I didn't even think
Yeah.
of that. It's like,
Right.
yeah.
Well, you
So,
had a
so
lot
now
to think about at the time.
yeah. So now I'm like, okay, we have to bury her and give her full military honors and
Mhm.
21 gun salute and the whole 9 yards and a headstone and a veterans cemetery. So I'm going to work on that in 2025.
Does do they do that for every veteran? That whole process that you just said, the 21 gun salute, that whole process, do they do that for every veteran that
Um,
passes?
well, you have to put it together yourself, just like any other funeral. And
Okay.
so I kind of went through that with my dad.
Okay.
When he passed away in 2022, I put together his funeral. And so I went through, contacted a local group for the honor guard. That's the ones that do the 21 gun salute and give you the flag and all
Okay.
that. And then you contact the VA for a VA headstone, which is
Mhm.
free, but you pick out which one and what you want on it. And so now I know the process. So I've checked into cemeteries in North Carolina, and they have really close to where they live. They have a state one, but she's not eligible for that because she had no connection to North Carolina. But they have about 2 hours away, they have a federal one. So I'm going to work with them about that.
Yeah. Well, I'm so sorry for your loss. It is absolutely tragic. And yeah, I mean, I'm kind of speechless on what to say, but I am happy that you're on this healing journey because, I mean, that was when your healing journey started, but your healing journey is going to be forever.
Yeah, yeah.
And what have you done beside writing the book? Did you dive into any alternate healings or energy healing or anything like that?
Um, well, not so much. I've gotten a little more into the spiritual component. The recovery program I'm in is called Narcotics Anonymous.
Okay.
And so it's a 12-step program, and that involves finding a higher power of your own understanding. And so mostly, and my dad had introduced me to this many, many, many years ago. Well, it's called the Center for Spiritual Living.
Okay.
So it's kind of like a non-denominational spiritual um, I mean, you can belong to other religions and participate in it or whatever. So, and then mostly because of COVID, I guess everybody now is into Zooms and YouTubes, and so one of the main places that's kind of under that umbrella is called the Agape Spiritual Center. I don't know if you've ever heard of them.
No, I
They're
haven't.
based in Los Angeles, Reverend Michael Beckwith.
Okay.
And it's funny because my dad took me there once. It had to be in the 80s or the 90s. So he was probably just starting out. It's like about 38 years old now, the center.
Yeah.
Um, so I actually went there once, and I'd love to go there now at some point. But he's got such a strong, positive message. And I follow other people. I had thought we kind of put together a meetup group when I first got here. There was a meetup group I got involved with. So there's several people, like-minded spiritual people, where we did explore a lot of those alternative healing and spirituality things. And I like Wayne Dyer, Abraham Hicks,
Yes.
and I finally got into meditation,
Mhm.
which meditation, originally I thought meditation, you sit on a pillow cross-legged and you're silent, you don't think any thoughts at all. And
Right.
I actually went to a meditation center in Chicago for a while that was like that, but yeah, that was really hard for me. But now I do meditation almost every morning, and I use YouTube guided meditations.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I usually go like 10, 15, 20-minute meditations and positive affirmations and all that stuff. And it helps a lot. Yeah.
It
So,
does. It's funny that you say that about the meditation because I was so against it. I mean, I was like, how can you sit there and think about birds and songs and
I'll have kind of a preconceived notion of what it is, like a Buddhist. Like I have a friend that's a Buddhist, and she can meditate for like 45 minutes in this silent way. There's no way I can't do that.
Mhm.
So for me, I need that guided meditation. I need somebody talking, and I listen and focus on what they're saying, or then they say, do this mantra for 5 minutes or whatever. But at least they've given me the words to say. So I
Yeah.
like that a lot. Yeah, Tara Brock is another good person that she does talks and leads meditation, guided meditations.
Oh, let me write that down.
One of our NA groups is called the 11th Step, and that was another thing that it's been a couple years now, which I don't get to do it every week. Sometimes it might be a month or two between, but he started out with 5 minute singing bowl meditation. So just had the sound of singing bowls. And I really like that. And another thing I love is hang drum. I listen to hang drum videos on YouTube.
No,
It's
I've
such
never heard of that.
it's such a calming sound because first I would listen to like the piano ones, but I don't know, I didn't like them as much as the hang drum. I mean, they're just awesome. And then they have beautiful visuals to go with it, nature and stuff
Oh.
like that. So some
Yeah,
of them,
I'm gonna write that down because I forget everything. So
I know, me too. I write everything
it's the
down.
age, I swear. I'm like losing my mind. Yeah, because I want to see what that hang drum is. I know
Oh,
what
it's
singing
beautiful.
bowls and sound bowls are.
Yeah, that's how I very beginning started the meditation with. I would go out in my back porch
Hmm.
and sit there for 5 minutes and play on my phone the singing bowl music.
Hmm.
But the bugs got to be so I couldn't keep up with that. I was like, why do there have to be bugs? You
Right.
know?
I would take that as a sign to stop it. Like it wasn't
Yeah,
meant
it
for
did.
me.
Especially not outside, but other than the bugs, it would have been great.
Yeah, I bet. I bet. What else do I have? What have you learned along the way on your journey?
Oh man, I've learned so much.
What is,
Like,
what do you think you've changed the most on your journey?
well, what I'm noticing more recently that I've changed the most is I always had to be in control. I always had to do everything myself. I couldn't count on anybody else. Or, like I said, my main um, therapy was smoking weed,
Right.
getting
No,
high.
that's
That
honest.
was the main thing to ease my mind. And now I'm at a point where I really do feel like I have a connection with a higher consciousness. I like to
Mhm.
refer to it more as a higher consciousness, and that I can relax and things will work out. Sometimes it might. I have a friend that says everything's in divine order, no matter how it seems. And sometimes that's a hard concept to grasp, but it's kind of surrender, acceptance, letting go, trusting the universe, that
Yeah.
kind of thing. I'm kind of getting there, but just it's hard because still every day things come up that are like, oh my God, I can't believe you're giving me this today.
Right, right. But I mean, fear is fear of the unknown, like what is the next day going to bring, is an opportunity to grow.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just wake up and gosh, I just cannot go through this day again. It's just a bad day. It's emotional. You're thinking of all the bad things that have happened in your life. And you've just got to walk through that door and deal with it day one, one day at a time.
Yeah, I was just going to say that's the biggest thing, the one day at a time, not focusing on the past or the future and trying to make it through this day. What do I need to do to get through this day? And
Right.
hopefully what positive things can I get out of it, and
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it too.
do.
Focus
Yeah.
on the positives.
Yeah. I mean, even today I had a major, it's just so crazy. I own rental property. So dealing with tenants is like I was telling my partner, it's almost as bad as dealing with teenagers. I don't know which is worse, but
I bet. I bet.
so one of my tenants, the gas, the heater, the water heater, yeah, the water heater went out, and I called this guy that helps me, does my maintenance stuff
Hmm.
at the property, and he's just like an awesome guy, the sweetest guy ever. And right away, the next day he goes check it out. The day after he takes out the old one and it was all clogged, took him forever to get the water out and puts in the new one. He does this all by himself, and he's not much bigger than I am. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh my God, I'm so impressed. And then the tenant um, asked me for his number. Oh, I got family members that need some help. Can I get his name and number? And then this morning he calls me and tells me this guy accused him of having relations with his girlfriend while he was over there. I was like, I couldn't
Oh
believe it.
my goodness.
Yeah, and then the guy says, I can't work over there. I can't work for your property anymore as long as this guy is there. And I'm like, I can't run this property without him.
Oh
It's like,
no.
and I
Yeah.
had to deal with that whole thing with this tenant. And oh, I mean, it's like, why did you give me this today? Especially this morning. I'm supposed to be chill for this podcast,
Yeah. No.
this drama.
I mean, what people come up with, it's
Yeah,
just
it's insane.
crazy.
So I don't know.
Crazy.
I
I'm
don't know how
sorry.
that's going to work out, but
You're 1 hour at a time.
exactly.
That's what you have to do. Well, Eva, that was a lot. That was a full life times five, what you've gone through over the years. And you are such a beautiful soul, and you're just smiling right through it. And I know your journey has been really rough. And I really appreciate you coming on this podcast and just bearing your whole heart for me. I mean, I really, really appreciate it.
Oh, no problem. So I tell you the name of my book and all
Yes,
that.
absolutely. That's a
That's
thick book.
how you put it up, right? Okay. Yeah, it's When Tough Cookies Crumble, a true
Yeah.
story of friendship, murder, and healing. And like I said, it tells the story of me and Janice in Korea, in DC,
Hmm. No, I
um,
look forward to reading that.
and the ins and outs of the investigation and who was responsible and why they did it. And it also relates to the fact that he was obviously a sociopath, kind of how to watch out for people like that.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, sounds too good to be true. It is, that kind of thing. And then, after that happened with Janice, I got hooked up with a sociopath myself. So
Oh
it's like,
no.
but I don't include the details. Well, I include the details of meeting him and how things started falling apart for me there as well. But and then Kay, part of her reason for saying, "Oh, I have to have somebody else write the book," is she um, was diagnosed with cognitive, what do you call it? Mild cognitive decline or something like that, but basically early stages of dementia or something.
Okay.
And the guy that ended up writing the book, he did write a book about it, and he called it, I don't even want to say the name of it, but he said the disappearance of Janice
You
Starr
can
was like,
email it to me. You can email me the name. You don't have to announce it.
yeah, but his came out a couple days before mine. They came out at the same time. When I read his book, I was so upset. I mean, he made up so many things. He never contacted me to interview me. He never contacted her family to interview her family. He even well, to me, it's just he plain lied about some parts of the investigation, how they went, and I was like, yeah, it was meant for me. I had to write my book, which was the true version of what happened.
Yes. Yeah, that's interesting. Wow.
Yeah, that was
What a
horrible.
jerk.
Yeah, so he took advantage of Kay, and her
Yes.
dementia because she's out there with him at all his book signings and, oh, he's promoting her as the hero that solved the case and everything. And she's basically co-signing. And I confronted her. I saw her again. When was this? Time goes so fast.
I
In
know.
August of this past year, 2024, after the books came out, very shortly after. And I'd come up with a spreadsheet because I love spreadsheets of every lie he told and why it was,
Oh my goodness.
but I didn't want to beat her up, because she's a
Right.
little old lady now and she's got dementia. Oh, I made it, but he wrote some things. She gave him some personal correspondence between me and her. It had some very personal information about me that she gave him that he put in the book. Now he gave me a pseudonym, but if you know that I wrote a book and I'm her best friend, you're gonna know who it is. So I was so upset, but I didn't want to really take it out on her too bad.
Yeah.
I feel like he took advantage of her, but I'm just so upset about it, and I still haven't dealt with it. I say I'm going to write the publisher, but I haven't yet because, again, I don't want to go into that negativity. I don't want to focus on the negativity of it, but at some point, I have to do that. But yeah, it's just crazy.
Yeah, it's just not kind and it's just not right.
It's unethical. Yeah, it's totally unethical. And he was a journalist, so I know he knows better. And he's written other books. I had bought and read his other books, and I'm like, well, if he did that to this case, what were the other books? How
Lies,
true are they?
probably. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
terrible. Yeah, I mean, what do you feel you have to do to let that go? Do you have to sit with it and then just go through the steps and process it, or do you have to confront the situation?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I originally looked up the law about, libel and slander and defamation and all that. And it's very jurisdiction specific, and so most of the jurisdictions that would be involved, like in Virginia or New York or whatever, uh, the law is more in favor of the publisher and free speech than like we're in this whole thing with misinformation right now, than on the side of truth or defending a person's privacy, you
Hmm.
know, things like that. So, yeah, probably wouldn't. And I tried to write a review on Amazon and they wouldn't accept it. So, it's hard for me to get the truth out. So, to him about him. But like we also did, there's a television show that's going to come out about it next year or this year, I guess it is.
Yeah.
And I told her, I told them, I gave them that spreadsheet that showed everything that was a lie, and they've read my book and they've read his book. And so I told them, please don't broadcast any of his lies. So, hopefully when that comes out, it will have the true story based on my story.
Hopefully. And if
Yeah.
not, I mean, you might have to take it a legal step forward, but I don't know if that's good for your healing journey or just let it
Yeah, it's
be.
probably not.
I mean, I cannot believe all you've been through. That's a lot. It's just a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it
But
sounds like you're a strong woman too. You've been through a lot yourself.
yes, I've had a lot of ups and downs based on health. So, one foot in front of the other.
Right. Yeah.
That's
But
all
what
we
you're
can
doing
do.
now is really good and important, I think, giving people a voice.
Thank you. I'm always wanted to help people my whole life. And so this is the next best thing for me is using my platform to help other people and let them tell their story. So I
Yeah.
really appreciate you coming on my podcast. I
I
really
appreciate
do.
you having me.
Do you have a website at all?
Yeah, it's called Enchanted Spirit Journeys. And my website, in addition to my book, I've put a quite extensive sections on other memoirs that I recommend,
Okay.
and also in a section for resources for people interested in writing memoir
Okay.
and books about writing memoir. So again,
Oh,
like I said, I think the healing part of writing is just the writing, and whether you decide to publish or not later is, another story. I felt I had to because there was this other book coming out,
yeah, for
but
sure.
just the writing of it, it just helps resolve so many issues and come to, like you said, about guilt and that kind of thing, and realize, there's nothing I could have done. I couldn't have stopped this sociopath from,
Right.
murdering my best friend,
Absolutely. There is nothing you could have done.
but I can make sure she has a military funeral with a 21 gun salute.
Yes, absolutely. And she would absolutely appreciate that. So
Yeah,
that's great. So that's your next step is doing that. So
yeah, yeah.
that's a great thing. It really is. So is there anything else you would like to say to before we wrap this up?
Not that I can think of. Just
Okay.
everybody be tough.
That's
It
we
takes a
are
tough
tough
cookie to live
gals.
in a tough world.
For sure, for sure. But as we come together, we can help others who feel lost in their journey.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Don't
onward and
isolate.
upward.
Yeah,
Yes.
don't isolate. There's so much support out there.
Mhm.
Um, just reach out and you'll find other people that you can relate to and that can help you on your journey.
Definitely, definitely. Well, Eva, thank you again so much. You are lovely, and the world is just amazing because you're in it.
Oh, you too.
So, what did you think of Eva's story? She definitely faced challenges across many years of her life, but I think her path to healing and self care has led her to the freedom she finally deserves after all these years. Okay, so please head on over to my website and see how to purchase Eva's book, When Tough Cookies Crumble. And thank you for your service, Eva. It was an honor to have met you. And thank you to everyone else, and we will see you next time.